I'll call to order the Town of Old Saybrook Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the second floor conference room. Roll call. Myself, Mark Caldarella, Vice Chair Jerry Lewis. John Henry is absent. Bob Freeman and Laura Gray, regular commission members. And seated for John will be Mike Kelly. Okay. Regular business minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, corrections, additions, anything? Hearing any, we'll move to vote. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, passes 5-0-0. Joanne, once again, thank you very much.
Wasn't my job.
The correspondence, I believe there's no correspondence for this evening. Our CEO officer is not attending, and of course, Joanne Galley, our clerk, is here. New business as a preliminary discussion. Regulations for large shopping centers. Agent Attorney David Royston. Mr. Royston, welcome.
Thank you.
And for the record, we have one person in the audience and
One online.
one online.
Yeah, I do, because we have to file it. Yes, yes, yes.
No, he has extra.
Yeah, there's.
Here's an extra one, right? If you have extra, I'd like one more for the file.
I could use it. Thank you.
Two more.
Thank you. I'll leave that for Chris.
You have one.
Did you get one more?
Yes.
Yes.
You have one for the record.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you
You're welcome.
very much. I asked to put this on the agenda. I do have a client, Access Place LLC, which would be affected by this, but it's not only for them. But I wanted to have a preliminary discussion to see if there would be an incentive for the commission to have a regulation proposed. And there's two aspects of this as I go through here. First is regarding shopping centers. Now, I've attached a description on the third page of your regulations for a shopping center. And I believe that that definition has been in effect as long as I can remember. It's hard to figure out when it came in, even though you have archived regulations, it only kind of says when the change came into effect. But as long as I can remember, shopping center has been defined as for businesses, and those businesses can be retail, financial, restaurant. So there isn't any lot area requirement for a shopping center. There are no special regulations concerning shopping centers as far as parking and signage and lighting and whatever. They go under the regular retail establishment regulation. There is one and regulation which has a I call it special effect for a shopping center potentially, and that is your regulation where you allow a building over 10,000 square feet, 10,000 or above, to if they have a storage area, to be able to separate that storage area out of the retail for parking purposes. That's at a storage area requirement rather than a standard retail requirement. So, and that was very helpful, and I think it's not a long duration, but I think it's an effective regulation. But as to signage, the regulations have become increasingly different. Right now, the last iteration reduced the maximum size of any sign from 100 square feet to 75 square feet. So as far as signage is concerned, the regulations have become more restrictive as to square footage, more restrictive as to the height of the sign, which is 10 feet for the structure, and the top structure 8 plus 2 feet for the sign above the structure, maximum 10 feet in height. I've talked to a number of other professionals, lawyers, engineers who do development work, and they all indicate that they believe these signage requirements are pretty restrictive, especially to a shopping center, which, even though by definition it doesn't necessarily have to be that big, it's just 4 business establishments. You could have 4 very small shops in a row on a very small lot, and it would still be considered a shopping center. But I think what the common thought is that a shopping center has more businesses and is occupying a larger area. So what we're suggesting for signage is that the signage requirement be for a shopping center be larger. And the way you could do that is if you take your shopping center definition, just add on to that area requirement and a number of businesses requirements. And what we have suggested, and we think is a workable, fair, and non-destructive sort of requirement would be shopping center have 8 business establishments, double the number of business establishments in order to qualify, and be on a lot at least 10 acres, so that it is what I think you have in mind when you talk about a shopping center. That would be simply by definition of what a large shopping center could have. Second part of that is that we think that the size of the sign also ought to be doubled. That it ought to be allowed to have 100 square foot sign and have it at an entrance to the shopping center, and have a second sign also same size if your entrances are more than 500 feet apart. I think it's noteworthy if you take a look at the picture attached. This is the section where in shopping center business B2 and B4. Now, shopping center business B2. Um, the shopping center isn't uh, defined uh, for the for the entire district. I think it simply means that this is a central shopping district where the Saybrook shopping center was and probably was the first one located. But if you take a look at the signs over to the right, and the signs are guidelines for what is appropriate signage. And if you take a look, those two signs are quite high. They're certainly more than 10 feet high. And the same thing if you go to the shopping center at Main and Now, Plus Now, now, their signs are similar to these in height. They're probably, I'm guessing, 20 some feet in height. But we think that there ought to be a regulation which increases also increases the size, the height of the sign. Not only the size, but the height. And it is limited to those businesses which are large on a much larger lot. And I think that one of the reasoning behind it is pretty simple, is if you have a lot of businesses, if you're going to put them on an 8-foot or 10-foot sign, there isn't really much room for the businesses. Somebody coming by in a car is unlikely to be able to identify what the business is. So that's kind of the concept of a relatively simple sign amendment by defining shopping center and then providing a regulation for shopping centers, which is less onerous than the existing regulation. The second item that I wanted to talk about was the EV charging stations. And I think this is something that should be addressed in the regulations because it's becoming very prominent. And Chris Costner, I've had discussions about this as to whether they count for parking spaces. And she says, well, it's we've got a lot of things and some of the places where employee of the month and some other sort of things, but we have allowed charging stations, which I think makes sense for short-term duration, because if someone is going to come in and for less than for 30 to 45 minutes probably, that they would spend the same amount of time if they went in and do Walmarts or any place else that they would do. So it seems that the short-term EV charging station would be okay to have that count for parking spaces, but just suggest that if it's going to be long-term, that it be not counted for required parking, but it be considered an accessory use to the retail. And what that would do is that you'd still have to have the required parking, but you could still have a longer-term EV charging station. As long as you met all the other parking requirements. And my understanding, and it comes a lot as I asked Dave Ziyax about it, and the longer term ones are like the charge in your house or garage, sometimes like 8 to 12 hours to get a full charge on those. And the other ones give you obviously a shorter time frame charge, but one doesn't know how much technology is going to change it. So that's it. Instead of filing an application, but just see if the commission had any ideas or willing to express any ideas as to whether we ought to go through a formal application process. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
giving me the opportunity.
Certainly. Commissioners, any comments or questions?
Shopping center definition in section 9, as you noted in your message from January 22nd, 2025. The definition has continued unchanged from its first adoption, as far as I can tell. I think that's an accurate statement because it was adopted very recently. It previously did have no definition of a shopping center. It was found only in the parking section. And so you're correct. The shopping center definition has not changed since it was adopted like 2 years ago.
For the
And-
definition, but they did in the parking section, they refer to it.
The your
Thank you.
information on signs relative to 64.5.5 and the large signs depicted there are either of those signs by variance, or are those signs that have those signs been there for long enough to have been approved under earlier regulation? I know the shopping center has signs by variance. The shopping center where Ocean State Job Lot, Town Fair Tire, and others are located, that sign is also by variance, and they're outstanding because the ZBA found some kind of a hardship. The regulations were changed at the recommendation of the Architectural Review Board not very long ago to reduce the sign square footage allowed. And prior to that, I'm pretty sure that it was 100 square feet as a maximum sign, like anywhere in town, because over 100 square feet or more is defined as a billboard, and billboards are prohibited. So to be consistent throughout town, except for previously existing or previously approved non-conforming signs, the objective was to keep the signs below 100 square feet. And the Architectural Review Board in the 21st century recommended that, with all the other means we have at our disposal, to find places that signage is not as important as it was in the 20th century, and that the size should be reduced further to what we have today.
So what I'm suggesting is that for today it's 75 is the maximum
Right,
for any sign.
but the ARB recommended that.
They took it from 100 down to the 75. They did.
Have you spoken to them?
Well, only to say, no, I haven't. That's the short answer. And only because obviously they're not regulatory, they're just advisory to the zoning commission. And I think it's probably this is first stop. They might be second stop depending upon what you had to say. But I think the change from the 100 the 75. I don't think that was a good thing for larger shopping center. Even though not defined by size. See, I think a shopping center ought to be also defined by size. So that's why I suggest you have shopping center large, just like you have setback rear, setback side, that there be a definition which gives more requirement that it actually be a larger type of facility, a larger lot, and that because you double the businesses, it's logic to go back to what was the maximum size before.
Perhaps it could be approached from the perspective of maximum square footage per tenant. And then the additive number of tenants would reach a maximum of square footage of signage. And that would treat all equally. And if I guess with a cap, so that can't put in say Stop and Shop has a pharmacy and it has a meat section and it has all those other sections don't count as individual tenants, even if they're paying rent per square footage
Right.
internally. That's not what I'm talking about. So that we wouldn't max out, we wouldn't have a superfluity of tenants adding to the sign above what the ARB and the zoning commission finds is right for the community. That would be an alternative approach. But again, the cap has to be there somewhere, whether it's 75 as the ARB recommended and we adopted, or back to the old 100 square feet.
I just think what you suggest, and I thank you for that, is a good way to approach it by doing it by certain amount of sign space for the number of businesses that are independent businesses within that shopping center.
Well, at the old Saybrook Shopping Center, for a while there were tenants that had their business sign on both freestanding pylon signs. That doesn't make sense unless the tenant is accessible from both sides. The only tenant like that would be Walmart, right?
Yeah.
So Becker's Jewelers or whatever should not be on the sign at the Route 1 side, according to signs being located near where the business actually exists. And the paragraph from your letter dated again today in section 6455A, there's allowed only one freestanding sign plus a second sign only when there's a lot with frontage on separate street with entrances more than 1,500 feet apart measured along the street lines. I believe it was you who proposed that as a regulation for Max's Place, which meets those conditions, because Stop and Shop having two pylon signs on different streets with multiple entrances, some of which might be 1,500 feet apart, but they got their second large sign by a variance. And rather than go through a variance, you proposed and this commission adopted that regulation allowing the two signs when there's adequate separation on the street line.
Two parts, and yes, I did propose the regulation for the second entrance on Paul Spencer Plain.
And are there two large signs at Max's Place?
There are.
No, there's only
no.
one big one.
Right.
And so the regulation as it exists wasn't even used to generate or.
But they do have the other entrance on the wall. There's a lettering that's considered a sign.
Right,
Yeah.
but there's only one large pylon sign.
Right.
But the lettering sign at the other entrance constituted a sign. So
Specific to the one retail space.
yeah, well, it was.
But it is a
just
sign, right?
it just instead of having a pylon sign
Right.
for all
Right.
tenants, It just said the Max's place, the shopping center. But the other thing is, I think you and I would be in full agreement with this agreement that I don't believe there is a hardship for a business to come in.
Well, that's their
to-
business. We stay out of that. Our opinion doesn't matter.
Well, my opinion doesn't matter either, and I have opinion that the first thing, say to client, well, what do you have for hardship? And it has to be something unique, and it can't just be because it's a desirable thing in your mind that isn't enough. So they got it, more power to them, but I'm not recommending to my clients that they go in. There's a new alternative to hardship, which is a reduction in nonconformities. So that sometimes is available for someone. So I'm going to reduce the size of my existing sign or some other thing of that nature, some other non-conforming kind of property. But that's a very difficult hurdle. I like the idea of a regulation, which is based upon signage per business.
Well, we've observed potential conflict in a shopping center, no less than 4 stores, where there may be only 3 stores for a time. There may be a vacancy, or maybe one store got larger when someone moved out. Maybe it's not even a shopping center at that point, but the square footage of the sign they already had is not, it's not required to be changed because it's previously approved. It may be non-conforming. And then if the site were to allow for another tenant or tenants, and they go back to being a shopping center, then the conflict is among the tenants and the landlord. That's not a zoning issue at that point. And so we don't want to get into those kinds of discussions, if you will, because that's not land use, that's sign use. That's once the sign is allocated as square footage for the site, be it a shopping center or not, we're done. That's for the battle of who gets how many square feet on the sign is not our venue. So we don't want to set up anything that brings that conflict to this commission.
Yeah, I think that from what you're saying, I think it would be helpful to talk to the zoning enforcement officer, because that's the one who gets to first. If there is
Well, the maximum per tenant would work, except that there may be a sign somewhere that has a blank area, which is not exactly conducive to promoting the vivacity of the businesses on that property, because there's an empty store in the back, and now you're advertising it on the street that there's an empty space in the back.
I think that can be done by even if the space is vacant, the use of that space has not been abandoned.
Well,
That
that's-
would be the
that's-
lawful use.
That's what I'm concerned with the decline in retail, that we have buildings in Old Saybrook which are not fully occupied, that there are vacancies. Are there any vacancies at the shopping center today?
In the Walmart one, there are, yeah,
There is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so if there's not as many businesses filling up the spaces that we already have, it's tough to argue that there should be more signs for empty spaces.
well, I guess you could reverse that, is the hope that you have business and signs identifying that there are people there, that people go. Business in general is good for the health of a shopping center. So sign is method of attracting people to come to the business that are in the shopping center. So I think to give them more opportunity to attract by signs, business by sign is a good thing, not a bad thing. It has to be controlled. And I note that we aren't talking about internally illuminated sign. The regulation that I would suggest was just would only apply to the non-illuminated sign. All those large signs, but I don't think there's any of them that I know of that are illuminated. But it's for the retailers, it's a big thing that somebody knows that they're there.
Well, as I said, people, if they're not ordering their stuff online and they have to or want to go to a store to see it in real-time 3D, they know how to get there already by use of their phone or their car, which tells them how to go. And signs are not as significant for finding places as they used to be.
If you know what you're looking for. I think still driving along. Signs are helpful.
Oh, there's an appliance store. I'll go look at refrigerators. No.
No, but I'm saying if you're in a place, then if you know that there is a store, grocery store, a Walmart type retail store, or you can get there's a bank in there. It's helpful for their business. You wouldn't want to be going to seeking signs unless it was worthwhile. I mean, that's their call.
What you're proposing is that right now we have 100 square foot max.
75.
I mean, 75.
75, yeah.
You want to go to 100
which
under the
was-
pretense of large shopping center, 8 acres or 10 acres or more. But what we're looking at is a 25 square foot increase from what it is now. And if you have a shopping center that has 6 stores, that 25 square feet additional divided down by 6 is a relatively small increase in my estimation. That's not going to do that much for identifying as you're driving by, oh, there's a fast food store, or there's a coffee store, okay? So I think that the ARB's recommendation to us a couple of years ago of restricting and bringing it down has been beneficial. And I'd be somewhat opposed to increasing it to the 100 square foot because I don't see what the gain would be there. There's, you have the exceptionally tall signs that we've seen in major routes around Connecticut and stuff like that. We're obviously that's not us here in Old Saybrook. But Bob's idea of the division of the number of tenants to square foot signs would also, I believe, eliminate the need to have a large or a small definition of a shopping center. It would be self-contained to be what it is today as it's defined in definitions as a shopping center. It might be a little bit easier.
We have to look at that because that could become a regulatory problem because the regulations within a district are supposed to be consistent across the whole district.
Yeah,
And if there's a shopping center in a B2 and a shopping center in a B4, are these regulations consistent throughout the whole district? Or we
Right.
just have to look for consistency
yeah.
in what results.
Yeah, good point.
So I think consistency, the uniformity clause, that does also allow different regulations for different size uses. So it's uniform in that sense. Okay, it doesn't take a part of the property and have
Well,
a regulation.
It's a concern that deserves to be investigated. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Mike, any insights?
No, not so much in that, but the one question is, we were talking, you had mentioned the EVs
Mhm.
in the long term. Why would someone want long term if it's superchargers? And who's gonna go for it? Unless you were going on a train to New York or to Boston. And
Right, or, you know, I don't think I don't think it's a problem. But if it was, they're gonna use it, I think that has to be included in your, or excluded from required. If you're required to have 40 spaces and 3 of them you had 40, but 3 of them were long-term EV, I don't think that should be.
You don't think long-term should be allowed? No. Is
No,
that
well,
my understanding?
it only if the space is not counted for required parking.
Where do you perceive seeing in a shopping center, EV charging stations?
Short term,
Yeah, sure, you know,
I
1,
think-
2 hour chargers.
I think they're on the side of Stop and Shop. I think there is a couple of spaces there.
So you would
Charging
you would see those as part of the main area for parking for access to a retail store or business.
No, I would think the retailer would want them more remote, in a more remote location than right up in front of the store.
I would think that if it was closer to the storefront, that they should be counted as parking spaces versus if they're remote, then the possibility of not counting them might be an option. But if they're gonna be in the main thoroughfare of the parking, I think they need to be counted.
Where's the Big Y has, where are they located? I think they have charging stations.
I think if you're facing the building, I think it's
off
the right-hand side. That's what I think. I'm not positive.
Yeah, I think they're down towards the coal side of the Big Y.
But they're towards the, well.
They're in the Big Y parking
Parking
area,
area,
but
right.
you're looking at Big Y head on, they're to the left, I believe.
And those are counted as spots, I would imagine.
They would have been counted back then, I believe, yeah. Brenda
What I
or Jerry?
don't understand about EV charging stations. You say is to allow EV charging stations for short-term use duration and then parens less than an hour. Does that work? I mean, do you plug your car in for less than an hour?
I think some of these ones, there's like a 15 to
There's
30
superchargers.
minutes.
Usually you see
It's
them
super-
on, you see
it's
them
a
on the
supercharge.
Barrett, yeah, the supercharger.
So but you wouldn't go there just to charge your car. You would be going there for a reason.
Shop and
Well,
then you
yeah.
plug your car in while you shop.
Whether you're paying for them or they're free.
There are people who go to charging stations because they're either on the road away from home.
Well, that,
Or they
yes.
live in an apartment building where they have to charge their EVs that way.
Yeah.
We still have a lot to learn about that, and
Yeah,
the state already has regulations in place regarding large parking areas being required to have
to have
charging stations.
charging stations,
But it
yes.
doesn't specify what level of charging stations, and the fastest charging stations could well meet the 1 hour limit in a practical sense, while the slowest ones, or those that aren't working, there's a lot of those too, it's not gonna work.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, Laura, Brenda, any comment?
So the state dabbling in requiring EV charging stations in large parking lots. It's gonna create another headache for us at the
Yes.
local level.
Well, I'm in favor of the signs that say who the businesses are. And I think it's a good idea, as Bob, I think, and Mark also recommended that if there's a vacancy, if it's possible to rearrange the sign so you don't have an empty space. Um, I kind of like to see a billboard of who's in the shopping center.
Well, Old Saybrook is a destination, so. I kind of like that too.
Did we give you enough insight as to what the commission is thinking to help you?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a small area that we might take a look at and see if we can get a little bit of relief from what we think is a overly restricted restrictive sign policy for as Jerry says, it's a destination. People like to come here. So we can bridge that gap.
And I think it could be beneficial certainly to you, but also to this commission if you were able to have a similar dialogue with the ARB.
Yes.
And get their input.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Chris.
I'm gonna let Chris know.
Yep.
We do have one guest in attendance tonight.
Good night, David. Thank you.
For the,
I'm
Just
Dr.
observing.
Beach, and I was just, well, I thought they were gonna be talking more in depth about the plaza that was going. So. Hey, good, how are you? You just being nosy.
You're welcome to be nosy
Yep,
anytime.
that's
Good to
right.
see you.
So it was fine. David got what he was looking for, so it'd be helpful.
Be over. We're just-
Staff report.
Yep. So we've been busy as usual in the land use department. We're really trying this forest shore resiliency plan. We're trying to grant deadlines, so I've been consuming a lot of time. So thanks for excusing me for part of the meeting this evening. We're trying to get that wrapped up by March. We're working on the Long Island Sound Future Funds RFP. A few enforcement matters, so Cantina Beach. As you instructed, we did send a enforcement letter from our attorney asking that the sidewalks go in by February. They were due last September. So today, Santiago Castro came in. He and Byron Cruz apparently are now taking the business from Wilson Castro, who walked out and is inheriting the sidewalk. But I'm not really sure. There's a lot of back and forth. I guess Wilson and Santiago are cousins. There's some breach of agreement. So he came in today and is going to try to straighten it out. And he asked if the commission would give them till April. So I told him it was unlikely with the circumstance, but it's really your
How
decision.
could they pour sidewalks now with this weather?
You can pour,
And
we can pour with additives.
I
It's
mean,
not a
the
problem.
only thing that makes me think a little bit is in a preliminary meeting with Max's place, we're gonna have to coordinate the intersection changes at Denmore Lane, which would impact the sidewalks at Cantina Beach, so they may have to revise that so that they'll forward. Which
But
may-
we don't have an application for anything in Big Y yet.
Yeah.
So that could be months
So we've been meeting at the staff level, Jeff Jacobson and their engineer, Dave Ziyax. Dave Ziyax and Dave Royston and I met. Our traffic folks have been talking. We had a meeting with the chief as well about traffic. So we're just trying to get some preliminary things out of the way, and address them. And it did come up about the cantina side. So the only thought would be if they do put in the sidewalks by February, they may end up in a situation where Max's Place comes to rip them up, depending on how they're going to connect. That's
Well,
And they're asking till
April.
April, but there would be no construction across the street by April, if an application came in next month.
correct. But the
So-
plans could get modified to meet
I
the Max's
understand.
Place plans if they're
Yeah.
approved that.
No, I understand that. I think the challenge that I have had with this particular location has been that if there's been a series of extensions granted. We've demonstrated that we've worked with the party to allow them to get through their issues. And there will always be an issue of why you can't do something. And I think at some point, the commission has to reach an agreement and say, no, it needs to be done by this date. And my answer to your question would be the February is the date.
Well, I'm gonna weigh in
Mhm,
and
please.
say that you're absolutely correct, except that now the players have changed. And now it's the cousin, because the guy that we were working with walked out. And I don't know, I think we should give him the extra 2 months for the reasons that Chris said. Eh, Not that even, I don't even know if it will be done in 2 months. So, but just a thought,
No,
you know,
respect
I don't
that. I
know.
respect that.
It changed hands when the situation was already laid out. And it, caveat emptor, if the buyer or the cousin who ends up being the owner didn't fully understand, then that's not a land use problem. That's a transaction problem for somebody else.
That's true, but I still think for the reasons that Chris presented, that it might be in our best interest to perhaps give that extra 2 months. It's 2 months. I don't even know if it's gonna be,
So
Done by
the
2
question,
What's
right now.
what's the deadline that you're talking about?
I know.
I heard February. What's the
Well,
alternative?
it was February.
February is the date and the letter we sent from our attorney.
Yeah, that was what we
Was
did.
it the end of February, beginning of February, or just?
February,
So
It's
the-
almost
so
February
To
now.
us means the beginning, to somebody else it means
Means
the
the
end.
end.
so by the end
I
of
can pull
February,
that
by the end of
That's fine. So
February.
at the end of the month, they have time.
So make it February
So then-
28th. That's a whole month.
Right.
But they're asking for April.
Or is this a leap year? Could be the 29th.
That was last year.
Thursday, March 1st.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I have a question. Why would Max's Place affect the sidewalks at Katina Beach across the street?
Because they're proposing to put a traffic
Traffic
light in
light.
Denmore Lane, which
Oh,
Yeah.
would do infrastructure improvement.
okay, okay.
There's so many things, depending on so many other
When would
things.
they find out they're putting in light? Pretty step.
That
That-
could
that-
be.
that is-
Well,
that's-
that-
You're
you know,
talking,
down the road.
yeah,
you
you're
know,
talking the
So that's
state
even going
DOT.
further, so.
So the question is, do you want to have it kind of coordinate so that when Max's Place comes in, they're not ripping out sidewalks or just going forward with the sidewalks?
I just think they're struggling to be able to afford the $20,000, whatever the estimate is for sidewalks. If they're gonna get ripped out, I'd understand postponing.
How did they achieve how did they reach the date of April? And let's say it's April 1st.
Yeah, why did they say April?
What's
So
the rationale?
I don't know all the business
Okay.
details, but what I believe happened is Byron and Santiago were involved in the beginning. They sold the business to Wilson. There was some type of an agreement that Wilson, this is what they told me, so today,
Mhm.
and we've heard all different types of stories. but
Yeah.
Santiago said Wilson is responsible for the sidewalks and walked out of the restaurant. He's done with the restaurant, but they have some type of an agreement with him that he would put it in. They got the letter. They were advised of the letter because the letter went to the property owner, and the property owner called Byron and Santiago as the new tenants,
Yeah.
even though I think they were involved before, and asked what was going on with the sidewalks. They came in to ask for the extension because now they're taking it.
Because they're pissed off at the cousin because he didn't do his job.
Um,
I mean, putting that all aside, I don't know.
it's tough. I mean, obviously,
Highly
we don't wanna make people do things twice. If we know that April, there's a traffic light going up,
Going in, yeah.
okay? We don't know when that traffic light could possibly happen or happen at all. So we're still having a property with, that had agreed as a condition to put in sidewalks that aren't done yet. And it's been approaching 2 years.
something like the
Something
last
like that.
deadline is September
Right.
of last year.
And I think that what they're saying, if I interpret what you shared with us, is that they need until April 1st to get it done.
Correct.
And they'll get it done, is what they're telling us.
That's what they do.
All right. So we could reach April 1st and one of two things can happen. They're done or they're not done. So we're right back to where we are tonight. Okay? We're really looking at a period of about 60 days here. I guess the letter has gone from our attorney to them as a demand and an enforcement if they don't act by February, correct? So we would have to rescind that if we were to agree to an April 1st deadline. Because that letter is out there and is actionable. Yes,
Well, you can.
unless we
can
pull it
have-
back.
Well, we can just have our attorney say, after, discussion with the zoning commission,
Yeah.
you have until April 1st to finish this.
And if not,
Okay,
We're going for-
we're right back to,
Or would be-
right.
right.
But I think it would have to be clearly stated that come April 1st, or whatever that specific date we agree upon here, and it's not met, action will be taken. There will be no further opportunities.
The other thing too that I failed to mention is they're proposing they're gonna shut the restaurant down for 2 months to make improvements. Change the name, potentially paint the building, which would trip architecture review. They're saying they're not gonna make any changes that deviate from the statement of use, but they've got a new exterior coat of paint and some interior improvements. Would help, but really not during the 2 months. It would be a good time for the sidewalks while they're closed. We all know sidewalks go in when businesses are open. We've successfully done it through the town on Route 1. So I don't think that makes too much of a difference.
I've spoken, so I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners.
If they're gonna be making improvements to the building, that should be second priority to the sidewalks. So they made,
I'm just relaying the
Yeah, I know.
information
I-
that was provided to me. I'm not advocating one way or another.
Right.
I know,
So
so,
the history, that's, April 1st and come back and it's gonna be June 1st.
right.
Eventually you have to put the hammer down. I hate to sound like that, but eventually, you can't just be a paper tiger. I wouldn't give them any more time. Because they've been dragging their feet.
Brenda?
That's my two cents.
I think giving them till April, but knowing that after April, there are no more extensions. making that very clear. Because there's been a pattern of dragging this out, but if they, especially in the meeting, that April 1st, that's it. We're done,
Sure.
and then we'll cut.
Yeah, I'd like to give them till April 1st, but thinking back, you're right, we gave them all kinds of chances. They were young, they just kept saying, okay, oh yeah, we'll do, yep, okay. They didn't, I don't feel they even knew what we were talking about half the time.
Well, we've had different property owners too,
Yeah.
or business owners, I should say. So.
It's been a little bit of a
I know
shell game.
Business owner, business switched again.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think you need to take that
Yeah.
into consideration. I mean,
Yeah.
at some point, some new business owner has to.
Well, there's new business owners, but they're still related. Okay, so there's still a common denominator there. It's not as if you owned it and then I came in and owned it, and then I sold it to Jerry. Okay, it'd be different. Bob, any comments?
Bob?
Bob,
Any comments?
No, I'm with you. I think it's time to say the time is up. How long has it been going? I'm sure the attorney would mention the start date and the initiation of the actions and the letters and say that considering all of the time that has passed, I'm not gonna use a euphemism, the final date is, X. That's it. And the X, I think, should be, it could be February 28th.
Give them to the end of the month.
That's 5 weeks away.
February 28th. So Mike, you're in,
I've been agreeing.
Bob is in agreement with
Only
that.
because it's
I'm
been
in
going
agreement.
on so long, they
Right.
eventually, yeah.
I say April 1st.
Laura,
April 1st.
to April 1st. You're not
I'm not.
seated, so it's a 3-2,
February 28th.
February 28th.
Is that,
It's no longer the couple, the woman who spoke
no,
English
the
better
young
than the
couple,
guy?
I know,
Okay.
yeah.
Today I was told that they walked out, left restaurant.
Can they,
Putting it
can I,
back to
I think they weren't doing any business.
Well, I don't really
Yeah.
need to know the
There's
details.
so many
I know
things.
we've had
Yeah.
several people with
Yeah.
different relations to the business.
What do you need, Julia?
no, I don't need anything, but I thought Byron was the one who was on the original liquor license.
He's been on the liquor
License
license all the
from the
way through, and that's what I'm saying, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna get into
Yeah.
researching who was there to begin and so forth, but it's been back and forth.
Anything else?
I think that's it. Unless there's something for me.
The only other thing I share with everyone is that, a lot of things going on in town, particularly applications that may be coming in front of zoning, as well as other activities in town. So just be cautious with social media. As you sit, on a board and commission, you don't want to get entangled in anything that could cause an embarrassment to the town or to the, board or commission. So, other than that,
And I'll add to it sometimes, another board or commission, someone was on Facebook kind of saying something innocent about a comment someone made. And then it ends up in front of that board. So sometimes things that are completely innocent end up being a problem. So just beware.
Yeah.
not anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. by
Motion to
Jerry
adjourn.
Lewis, seconded by Bob Friedman, all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Opposed, abstentions, thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you for what you said.